One of the most common ways of rate limiting is based on IP address, so we're looking at it here for ASP.NET Core. First of all, code here is in the GitHub repository, that's in the description below. We're starting with an existing rate limiting policy. There are two policies in here. We'll get to the second one in a moment, but it is important. This policy is using the IP address of the calling computer. You can see that we're using a key, and that key contains the remote IP address of the connection. We're using a fixed window rate limiter. I've got a video on exactly how fixed window rate limiting works. There's a link at the top. You can see we're using the key as the partition key. Every request will be associated with that key. The limit says we'll allow 2 requests in any minute from any single IP address. We're using that policy for an endpoint, so if we go to that, refresh for a second call, then again, and we're limited, as expected. Now, going back to the other policy, in some environments, you'll find there's a proxy in front of the web server. If that's the case, then when you get the IP address from the request, you get the address of the proxy, which will be the same IP address every single time. That isn't going to be useful for rate limiting. In that scenario, it's common to see the HTTP request have a header called x_for, which is why we've got another policy here. The proxy adds that header and includes the IP address of the actual client, which means we can still use it for rate limiting. The rest of the policy is exactly the same. We're just using that header as the partition key. So we could use that policy instead. The critical thing here is that you can't trust web headers from the client, because really we can't trust anything in a web request. It's possible to alter everything in there. So to demonstrate this, I'm using Burp Suite as a proxy to catch a request from the web page and adding the header. I send that request once, twice, and the third time I get limited. If I change the IP address in the header, then I immediately get the page without being limited again. There isn't a proxy in here, but it's just a demonstration of being able to change headers. What I'm saying is, make sure your proxy overrides any x_for header that might have been set by the client. Finally, because you decide the partition key for rate limiting, you can make it whatever you like, a user ID for example. That's it. Like if this was useful, subscribe if you want more.